Hello! It's me again, Yunson Marajoy, back again for another subtopic of age and acquisition. We have learned in the previous reporter, which is Ms. Padillo, that there are a lot of traditional arguments that says second language acquisition reaches a crucial stage around adolescence, after which people appear to be generally incapable of learning a second language. This has led some people to believe wrongly that by the age of 12 or 13, you are over the hill in terms of acquiring a second language. Over the hill is often used for describing someone who is old and no longer useful. In short, incapable of learning second language. They have these stereotypes that when you reach the age of 12 or 13, you are over the hill in terms of acquiring a second language. So, to investigate these concerns, we'll discuss the different considerations, starting with neurobiological and phonological factors, then go on to cognitive, affective, and linguistic considerations. Neurobiological considerations. Neurobiology is the study of cells of the nervous system and the organization of these cells into functional circuits that process information and mediate behavior. The study of the function of the brain in the acquisition process has been one of the most promising areas of investigation in the age and acquisition research. Now let's take a look on what role does neurological development play in second language acquisition. Is it true that the brain's maturity spells the end of language acquisition ability at some point? Let's find out. Under the neurobiological consideration, there is hemispheric lateralization, biological timetables, and right hemispheric participation. Let's discuss it one at a time. Hemispheric lateralization. Some researchers believe that the brain lateralization is the key to answering such a question. One of the most interesting areas of inquiry in second language acquisition has been the study of the function of the brain in the process of acquisition. According to the neurological studies, certain functions are assigned or lateralized to the left hemisphere of the brain as the human brain matures, while others are assigned to the right hemisphere. So, as you can see in the picture, intellectual, logical, and analytical functions appear to be largely located at the left hemisphere, while the right hemisphere controls functions related to the emotional and social needs. Language function appear to be controlled mainly in the left hemisphere, and though there is a good deal of conflicting evidence. Questions about how language is lateralized in the brain are interesting indeed. A more crucial question for the second language researchers has centered on when lateralization takes place and how the lateralization process affects language acquisition. Eric Lenneberg and others suggested that the lateralization is a slow process that begins around the age of 2 and is completed around puberty. During this time, the child is neurologically assigning functions little by little to one side of the brain or the other. Included in this function, of course, is language. And it has been found that the children up to the age of puberty who suffer injury to the left hemisphere are able to relocalize linguistic functions to the right hemisphere to relearn their first language with relatively little impairment. According to Thomas Scoville, he extended these findings to propose a relationship between lateralization and second language acquisition. He suggested that the plasticity of the brain prior to the puberty enables children to acquire not only their first language but also a second language. And the possibility it is the very accomplishment of lateralization that makes it difficult for people to be able ever again to easily acquire fluent control of a second language, or at least to acquire it. With Alexandra Giora, she called it authentic pronunciation, while Lenneberg contended that lateralization is complete around puberty. Norman Geschwind, among others, suggested a much earlier age. Stephen Krashen believes that the development of lateralization may be complete around age of 5. Krashen's suggestion does not grossly conflict with research on first language acquisition if one considers fluency in the first language to be achieved by age of 5. Scoville cautioned against assuming with Krashen that lateralization is complete by age of 5. He said that one must be careful to distinguish between the emergence of lateralization at birth, but quite evident at the age of 5, and completion only evident at about puberty. If lateralization is not completed until puberty, then one can still construct arguments for a critical period based on lateralization. Obler notes that in second language learning, there is significant right hemisphere participation, and that this participation is particularly active during the early stages of learning the second language. Genesi concluded that there may be greater right hemisphere involvement in language processing in bilinguals who acquire their second language late relative to their first language, and in bilinguals who learn it in informal contexts. There are a lot of counter-arguments, right? Then let's put it in the simplest way. Hemispheric lateralization. The brain assigns different functions to the left and right hemispheres. The process of lateralization begins at the age of 5 and ends around puberty. The brain keeps its flexibility during this period, allowing children to learn not only their mother tongue but also the other languages with native pronunciation. Let's proceed to biological timetables. Thomas Scoville's intriguing multidisciplinary evaluation of the evidence accumulated was one of the most compelling arguments for an accent-related critical error. He cited evidence for a social biological critical time in several mammalian and bird species. Others saw parallel between the acquisition of bird song and the acquisition of human language. Scoville's evidence suggested that around puberty, species develop a socially bonding accent that allows them to, first, form an identity with their own community as they prepare for parenting and leadership duties, and second, to attract partners of their own kind in an instinctual drive to sustain their own species. The social biological evidence cited by Scoville leads us to believe that native accents and thus after puberty foreign accents may be genetic leftover that is no longer necessary for the survival of the human species. Given our widespread human practice of mating across dialectal, linguistic, and racial barriers, an accent appearing after puberty, according to Scoville, is the price we pay for our preordained ability to articulate apes. Walsh and Diller, following another line of study, claim that distinct parts of a second language are learned optimally at different ages. First is lower or order functions like pronunciation rely on immature and less adaptable neural circuits, making foreign accents harder to overcome after childhood. Second is the higher order language functions, such as semantic relations, are more reliant on late maturing brain circuits, which could explain why college students can learn several times as much grammar and vocabulary than elementary school kids in the same amount of time. To conclude, biological timetables. During this period, children develops their identity as part of a community and then acquire their language as part of it. Once this identity is achieved, the need of the ability to learn a language as a native is not necessary. Moving on to the right hemispheric participation. Another branch of neurolinguistic study looked on the involvement of the right hemisphere in second language acquisition. Obler noted that the right hemisphere participation is significant in second language learning, and that this participation is particularly active during the early stages of learning the second language. However, this participation to some extent consists of what we will define as acquisition strategies. So this will be discussed by the group 5, the chapter 5, the participation as acquisition strategy. Right hemispheric activity, according to Obler, includes guessing at meanings and using formulaic phrases. Genesi and Siliger have discovered evidence for right hemisphere participation in complex language processing rather than early language learning. Genesis stated that there may be right hemispheric participation in language processing in bilinguals who acquire their second language later than their first language, and in bilinguals who learn it in informal circumstances. So this conclusion does not appear to contradict Obler's previous assertion, but according to these studies, the second language learners, particularly adult learners, may benefit from increased right brain activation encouragement in the classroom. However, as Scoville, such a conclusion should be approached with caution because the research yields a lot of contradictory evidence, some of which has been grossly misinterpreted in an unhappy marriage of single-minded neuropsychologists and double-minded educationalists. Brain research will not provide a quick fix to our teaching problems. So clearly, the debate about the right hemispheric contribution to language processing is set to continue for some time. That is according to Singleton and Ryan. They conclude after reviewing 2 or more decades of research on lateralization, because there is no agreement on what constitutes strong evidence in this case. So the conclusion must be the resolution of the controversial matters is still a long way off. Again, right hemispheric participation involves in the early stages of second language acquisition and contributes to strategies such as guessing the meaning of words using formulas. So there are a lot of assumptions, right? We'll continue discussing the next subtopic about anthropological evidence to be discussed again by Ms. Padillo. Take it away, Ms. Padillo.